Welcome to the weekly Savage Worlds GM Hangout podcast. It's been a long week, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's discussion, we're going to be talking about finding narrative. I'm your host, Jared Savage Dedigan. This episode and all episodes sponsored by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Check them out today at Roll20.net. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook, SWGM Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube channel, SWGM Podcast, and iTunes, Savage Worlds GM Podcast. So, here to discuss it tonight, author and acclaimed Savage Worlds celebrity, Chris the Savage Mommy Fox.
Arr, mateys.
Dave the Rules Maven Scott.
I've got no follow-up.
Dustin the intern.
Oh, hi, guys.
And returning is his reigning champion of smartass comments, Scott W. Savage Cheerleader.
Skadoosh.
So tonight we're talking about finding narrative, and what we're talking about is we want to discuss bringing narrative into your role play, and I do mean the ROLL play version of what's going on at the table, not making it so much about the game mechanic as part of the discussion, not making it so much of a miniature tabletop simulationist board game. How do you reinforce the story, the narrative, the descriptive elements in the everyday mundane roles that we have to make and things that we have to do? And as GMs, how do you encourage that? What are your tips and tricks? And how do you go about doing it? So there we go. That topic's been released into the wild. If you're watching on the live stream, feel free to comment. Dustin's monitoring that chat window, and we'll be throwing out your questions and comments as we go. So I think I'll start off the conversation. I think one of the biggest things that happens is not denying the hit when it comes to making a soak wound roll. So my character hits your NPC, your player character hits my NPC for a raise, and they roll the extra damage, and bam, there's 2 wounds. And then I as a GM, drop my Benny and soak it. But I say it never happened. All that just never happened. You never hit me. I didn't take the wounds. Your arrow went flying right by my head, and that's how I narrate it. Go ahead, Dave. I see the smile, the evil grin. Tell me why I'm doing it wrong.
The wound never happened. The hit absolutely still fucking happened. The soak roll doesn't negate that roll to hit or the raise that came with it. The soak roll simply means that the defender did something to turn that into less of an assload of damage.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Terminator taking the shot in the face and then just turning back and looking at you. It's the guy who gets shot and comes up and it's got stuck in a hip flask, or from Suicide Squad, the guy takes the knife in the chest and in combat, they're rolling around on the ground and he gets stabbed, and then he pops up and a brick of $100 bills falls out with a knife sticking out of it. These are epic soak rolls that don't take away the hit. They don't take away that enormous moment, but they absolutely keep you from suffering 2, 3, 4, 8 wounds.
And forcing your player and yourself to narrate and come up with those narrative explanations and reactions to why makes for a better, well-rounded story in combat as well, right? Instead of just, oh, you hit me, oh, I soaked it, oh, you hit me, oh, I soaked it, oh, you hit me, oh, I soaked it.
Right. It keeps it fun and moving, right? Because you want to keep the heart rate up is how I run. It's like everyone's heart rate should be at 180 to 220 beats per minute when you're in a combat situation. I don't know. You have fun with it. Yeah, because no one wants that boring ass vanilla combat of I hit, I miss, I hit, I miss. I move my doll 4 inches. I hit, I miss.
Right.
Well, and I mean, the funny aspect of it is we all talk about how it's such a cinematic system, and it does this and it does that, and it's fast, furious fun. But at the end of the day, if you're not weaving that narrative description into those things, it's not fun. You've left a whole third of the thing off the end of the table, trying just to make that combat a little faster and maybe even less furious.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you say, well, that soak roll negates the hit, well, then the character was never in danger.
Yeah, I think a lot of this, though, comes from, and we say it all the time, we bash on other games, but it comes from attrition systems is really what it is. It's not a lot of narration in those because, again, when you each have 200 points and nothing matters until you get to that last hit that takes you to 0, that narration kind of goes out the window because all you're trying to do is you're trying to move as fast as you can to knock that 200 hit points down to where you can get that last hit to 0. And then maybe you narrate that last hit to 0. Well, in Savage Worlds, of course, you don't have that worry. You can narrate that from the very beginning and, flex that creative muscle. And I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I do that and I'm good at that. It's something I'm going to work on. I'm getting ready to start a group on Sunday in Riffs. And that's something that I'm going to, just sitting here tonight, just in the last 10 minutes of us talking about this, it's something that I'm going to try to work on. And hopefully by me doing that, the rest of the players can do that. And some of them won't. And that's another thing I think is if you have those people who just, they get that, we've talked about this with other things like interludes, they get that deer in the head look, or headlights look, and they're not sure what they want to do, then sure, I hit ISO, blah, 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 move on to that person. And maybe having those other people narrate more, that person's going to be listening to what they're saying and getting ideas. And they might even just copy an idea or two the first couple times. Well, who cares? At least they're giving it a shot. It's like Jared and his accent thing. Everybody, try to do an accent, whether it's good or not. It's that same thing. At least you're going to get that person to maybe give it a try.
Well, that's that old rule, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
I don't care if every time your character takes damage but doesn't actually suffer a wound, I don't care if all you do is quote me, it's like this scene from this movie. If you do that much as a narration, you've already right there added to the net sum of the game. It doesn't matter if it's tired that you're constantly quoting movies.
You have two training wheels with gaining narration in combat, right? And I use this all the time for even players who have played for decades. Is your first approach is when they kill something, ask them, okay, so this is going to end this opponent. What does that look like, right? And the first couple times it'll be a little weird for them, but then they eventually get into it, and you'll start hearing all kinds of crazy shit, like I rip his nuts off and shove them in his mouth and then punch through that, and so they'll start having a good time with it. And then the other side of that is you have to do it coinciding with the killing something. Is all right, so you narrowly avoided that, or what did that look like? How did you manage that? Or when you failed on that, so what prevented you from succeeding? And give them those options, and you'll see those training wheels start to build that narration for people.
Right. So let's say, for example, I'm the GM and I got one of my wild cards. He's the big bad, and one of the players is a knife aficionado, blade guy, and he I have a sword, and I bring it down, and oh shit, he gets a raise on the attack roll and does 4 wounds to my NPC. Now, that's a pretty dramatic moment right there, just because the game is gone. Boom, attack roll raise. Boom, 4 wounds. That in of itself is dramatic and tense enough. Now, when I drop the Benny to soak it, I'm not going to announce I'm spending a Benny to soak. I mean, everybody knows that you're doing that. Don't say that as a GM. That takes you out of the narrative and bumps it, right? You just throw down the Benny, you make the roll, and I soak all of it. And so as a GM, I go at the last second when it comes down, he slaps both hands around the blade, and instead of it going deep into his chest, he pushes it aside, and it drags this trench through the bare skin of his chest. Blood's going everywhere, and then he releases it at the last minute, and the full thrust follows through past his ear. I haven't denied the amazing attack. I've told you why I have no wounds. and I'm not even shaken because I spent a Benny and my big bad is now a badass instead of some asshole GM who rolled and soaked 3 wounds, 4 wounds.
Well, and the interesting aspect of it is, it doesn't. You can very easily tailor this on the fly. Let's say your big bad is very nimble, and the guy who hit him is the barbarian. He's using the giant 2-handed sword with an overhand cleave. Then, as soon as he rolls that to hit roll, and he scores that raise, you narrate. You bring the claymore down, and it passes all the way to the ground, slamming to the ground with enough force to kick up a cloud of dirt. Roll damage. Yeah. This means you've already narrated that no matter what happens, he's cleaved through the enemy to the point that he causes a environmental effect to have happened. Now you roll the damage, and oh, look, it was really low. Okay, you just scraped the front of his armor. Where it was really high and it gets soaked is the cloud slowly fades away, and you can see the long bloody streak down his chest. But you can also see where he stepped back, and you just grazed him where you thought you had gotten the true hit. You can modulate that, and that's 2 different descriptions to the exact same attack, all of which result in no real damage to the enemy. Then you've got Jared's, he catches the blade. Another one is simply he gets his shield up in time and goes down to 1 knee under the force of the blow. Now you've got 3 different descriptions, all just for this guy was hit by a big sword. Throw in, a more life thing. You stab, but instead you soundly run him through, catching his traveling cloak, his jerkin, the back of his traveling cloak, and ripping out the side of his backpack. But you never hit meat.
Yeah, and I think too that a lot of this goes towards narration as well, the preemptive narration, where ideally in a situation you want the player to narrate their action as they roll the dice for effect, and then interpret what the dice roll is. And it's something that Jib has said on this podcast at least more than once, is that, okay, so you describe this lurid description of your attack, and at the last moment before it strikes, pause. Don't go any further. Make the roll, and then tack on, and he swiftly missed. And I swiftly missed.
Yeah.
If you're not going to reroll, if you're not going to take advantage of the meta mechanic whatsoever. It's just, it's all in all better. Go ahead, Dustin.
I was going to say, we just had a question posted by Alex Muzzy referring to narrating damage, and it looks like he's talking about narrating damage to a mob. I quote, assume the mob has invulnerability to normal damage. A player rolls all the damage ever, but it's not magical damage, so the mob is immune. How would you narrate that? I.e., players roll 40 plus damage with a staff against a golem.
Well, I think it depends on if we're talking immunity or invulnerability, because I believe with invulnerability they can still be shaken by the damage, whereas with immunity they can't. So I think that's going to change. Obviously, the guy cracks the staff into the golem. I think you've got the guy standing there getting that classic the vibrating stick as he feels like he just hit, the immovable object with the unstoppable force kind of a thing.
That's exactly what I would say.
I would let the damage stick. I would narrate the damage and make it gruesome. So, like, I would say, the golem, you bring the sword down or whatever, and you see it literally slice it in half, and it starts to go sideways, and it's screaming, and there's blood everywhere. Then suddenly, it comes back together with the sword in the middle and pulls it out of his chest and looks at you. You could go ahead and narrate the damage that happened, but it has no effect. So narrate it not having an effect and watch the player go, oh, shit.
Yeah, you go with the liquid Terminator moment where all of a sudden your weapon is stuck through the enemy and they have control of it, or they pull it out of their own side, reforming, as they drag it through their own body. Again, I think that the biggest problem when people ask these, well, how do I do X questions, is it's so much going to come down to stretching that improv muscle as a GM to come up with a description that fits the current situation. We can't give you 100% answer for every version of what you just suggested. What happens if it's a werewolf where, if they're not being hit with silver? What happens if it's a clay golem versus a robot that reassembles itself versus a earth elemental that, can't be damaged in any way, shape, form, or fashion without a specific lodestone? There's all these different variables, and you have to decide what's the best reaction that imparts this idea of the massive hit without the damage in that situation.
Yeah.
So, Dave, in Savage Worlds, the bestiary, refresh my memory if I'm remembering this correct or not, and we'll look it up if we need to. Werewolves can be shaken by damage, but
Yes.
cannot be damaged by anything, cannot suffer wounds or take wounds from anything. It's not silver.
Yes,
Right.
I believe it's actually invulnerability where they are invulnerable to that damage unless it comes from their that's immunity. They are immune to all damage unless it comes from their weakness source, but they still are shaken by the attack.
So that would be another example where you attack a werewolf, you hit it with, a shotgun in the face, and it howls in pain.
It's gonna,
and it's
recoil,
shaken.
but
Maybe
not
it's like holding its face, but then the next minute it's just right back at you.
And that might be a regeneration thing too.
I think one of the things that I've noticed is that when you have folks coming over from other settings, I'm not going to single out any particular ones.
Yeah, like fucking Fate.
Oh, yeah.
That
We all
piece of
know.
shit
We all
system,
know.
Fate. No, we're talking about Fate.
Oh, sorry.
Obviously, he's obviously referring
Yeah,
to
'cause
Fate.
so many
right.
people use Fate to come here.
So what we have is like you have that mindset of cause and effect, and everybody, like the old saying goes, is like if you're a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And in terms of narrative, if you're going to GM that, you got to ask yourself, what is the primary essence of this obstacle? What makes it what it is, And think about how would something that had that particular makeup actually go into a combat? Like an alligator is going to hide near the water or lure you into the water. A panther is going to hide in the treetops. Narratively speaking, you can't just say, okay, this random thing appears in front of you. No, if a panther is lithe and agile, it'll roll over the punches. If an alligator is dense and tough, it'll turn and take the hit. Just think about what makes it what it is if you're going to throw it out there for your players.
And if you're a sea lion, you could easily get the drop on a 6-year-old girl.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Just you have aquatic swimming in a D6, you get the drop.
Yeah, and if you're a cartoon alligator, you can lure people in with a clever banjo tune
True
in the middle of the swamp as well.
That's very true.
So let's talk about this one. One of the major benefits, or one of the major meta mechanics in Savage Worlds, is the reroll. Ah, shit! I missed. I don't like that. How do I reroll? And then how do you do that narratively? Do you make the player give you a narrative explanation of why they're rerolling, or just let them reroll? I go to shoot and I miss.
Well, I think
At the last second, after I spend the reroll and I succeed, at the last second, I did what?
Well,
I think
you have to remember it's the GM's job to narrate all this stuff. If you're giving your players that agency to narrate that, that's great. But if they don't want that agency, if they're pushing back on that at all, that deer in the headlights thing, you don't make them. You come up with something interesting yourself.
Yeah.
Well, but I think we already talked about this. So I narrate, then I roll my dice and I see that I missed. I can then spend that Benny, then I roll and I hit, then I finish that narration.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's what we said. We said you roll or you narrate, you pause, you roll, you narrate. So you might have to pause a little bit longer. But I kind of see what you're saying, because the GM obviously has to tell you that you missed.
Yeah,
for you to get that reroll.
You can absolutely have that moment where player A takes the swing at the target, misses the roll, and the GM goes, and you miss wildly over his head as he ducks. And the player goes, well, I spend a Benny and I reroll. Oh, look, you scored all the raises ever. You're deft and are able to reverse the blade and come back around, and his duck takes him directly into the path of it. Now roll some damage. You can absolutely weave that in, but again, this is that improvisational muscle that the more you flex it, the more you use it, the easier it gets.
So in a fantasy, to use a fantasy example, I go to swing at the orc with my sword, and I miss. And so as a GM, I go, your hand is covered with so much blood that you feel the pummel sliding out of your grip. And then, I'm going to spend a Benny to reroll. Great. Roll. At the last minute, you grab it with your other hand, or you reseat it and get control of it, or over your back of your hand and reposition and come back down again, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing we're talking about.
Yeah, you just retroactively change what you said from a miss into a hit.
Right.
Right. And just narrate.
Or, yeah.
I would say outside of combat, right, is also, I thought, what you were court of asking, right? Because if I'm picking the lock and I'm like, fuck, I didn't get my target number, so here's a Benny. Mm-hmm. There's not really a lot of room to narrate that, because it's really not – that narration and action really isn't complete until it's complete, right? You don't like, oh, no, let me slide my other fucking pin. I mean, you could, but it just –
Yeah, I think this is mostly a – talking combat wise, I think that's our main focus this evening. I would think. Well, I mean, I could be wrong.
Not necessarily. I'm talking about like in everything you do with the Benny mechanic, everything you do with the roll. Like for example, I'll give you a great example. I know a lot of GMs, and guilty as charged. I've done it and do it as well. Okay, guys, we do this thing called an interlude. I hand out these cards. Okay, so you read the suit of your card. You tell us a story based on the suit of the card, and when you're done, you get a Benny. Go. And what I should be doing is framing that in a narrative and going, it's the drop ship moment in Alien. You're all strapped in. The mothership has let it go. You're heading into atmosphere. It's, you're shaking around. And this suddenly reminds Hicks, who, wakes up, suddenly reminds Hicks that, and then behind I just pull a card and see a club of a really, really bad drop that happened. Tell us that story.
Yeah.
Is how you would do that to make it more narratively focused and framed.
Well, and I think the interesting aspect of how do you narrate the reroll on the fly for non-combat things is the same way you narrate those non-combat things to be interesting and exciting. From Scott's example of picking the lock. You pull out your set of tools and you start to pick the lock, and at the last second you realize, oh shit, this is the wrong set of picks, and spend the Benny. Oh, you know what? You do actually have the right pick in your bag, or shit, no, you spent the Benny and still failed, came up double ones. Not only do you not have the right pick in the bag, but maybe you got your current pick stuck in there, and you're going to have to give me an agility roll to get it to come free. You can absolutely find interesting ways to liven that up, but it's really no different than coming up with something interesting in the first place. How do you make a lock-picking roll exciting? Well, that's the same way you're going to make the re-roll on the lock-picking roll exciting.
Right.
But is that necessary? In the grand scheme of time, and you got.
I think it depends. I think it depends on the situation. If it needs to be, then yes. If it doesn't, then no.
Well, here's how I'm going to qualify that, Scott. If you're calling for a roll, it better be important. So
that was the direction I was going to go. Is
always a fact.
Otherwise, you just pick the lock.
Right. Yeah.
If it's important, we would have bypassed the lock entirely and just gone right to what's inside of whatever it is you're opening.
But I understand what you're saying too. Is it the focus of the game? Is that what you're there to play? Is to do lock picking rolls? Obviously, no. I would hope not. I'm sure the thief in your group really wants to flex that skill and use it. It's important to them.
Yeah.
So, you know.
But they're not. Most people. I mean, like I said, it's just, I don't think most people are really interested in narrating. Oh fuck! I have the wrong tool set out. Let me get the new tool set out. Here's the Benny to prove that, and then move forward. You know what I'm saying? It's
right. I think you do the thing where you could also do the thing where you're going, okay, so you go to pick the lock, give me a roll.
Yeah.
Ooh, you know what? You hear the tumblers click, and you get a sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach. Oh, you misinterpreted what style lock this is. What do you do? And if it's like, oh God, okay, I spent the Benny. Okay, you spend the Benny, you take a moment, you reassess the situation and figure out, and you pick up the other part of your lock pick and put it in the right position.
Now that's more interesting than, is that roll good? Are you happy with failing that? You know what I'm saying? Like that
Right.
definitely is a lot more interesting.
Well, and I think this is also where the interesting aspect of it is, how important is the Benny being spent?
Right.
If a player is spending that Benny, that should be an indicator to you as the GM that moment means something to that player. That's where I would key in. There definitely needs to be that additional narration, because whatever it is that's happening in that moment is important to that player.
Yeah.
They're spending that limited resource they have, those bennies.
Or your Benny could be narratively explained as one of the fledglings in your party going, excuse me, sir. As you go to pick the lock, like, I think you may want this lock pick. Instead, it can be an explanation for why you're spending the Benny. It doesn't have to be, it can be take advantage. And what we said as far as improv, it depends on the situation, the environment, the circumstances of what's going on. Find something that's appropriate instead of falling back on a scripted narration or description.
Well, and this is sci-fi, and now instead of, it's a lockpick, it's you're going to try this new code breaker you just built this week that you're slapping on the door, and that becomes the narration. And, oh shit, the new one broke. Here's the Benny. You pick the thing up, rewire it really quick, and put it back on the door, and it works. You can make it interesting. It's just you have to play with whatever situation is at hand.
Right. Now you could actually do narration as a retcon mechanic as well, right? I mean, if you're giving narrative control to your player, you could do it as a retcon mechanic. If anybody's ever seen the television show Leverage, an example of using a Benny as a retcon mechanic is, oh shit, they're trapped in the building. The security's coming in. There's no way out. Cut to commercial. Then we come back from a commercial. We're picking back up, and then flashback 4 hours earlier, where they stashed a gun in the safe, and they've got the safe open, and now there's a gun in the safe, and they reach in and pull out a gun. You could do the same thing as a Benny mechanic if it fits your style of what you're doing as far as the game. Totally play Benny's as a retcon, as a flashback.
So
why not?
Speaking of which, Jared, you wrote the Heist Companion.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the primary aspects. Players actually got the ability to change the scene based off of that, narratively speaking.
Right. There was a little bit of a card mechanic in there as well. We kind of used that a little bit too. If anybody's seen the Cyberpunk setting series and the actual play from that, we put that in there as well as part of the planning phase, where you could retcon. You basically get bennies that give you narrative control over the scene and the situation. Oh no, it just so happens I failed that roll here. I'm spending a Benny to automatically succeed and narrate that. Oh, hours earlier we drugged everybody's coffee in the security stand and they're all passed out.
So that brings up an interesting point for a lot of game masters. Bennies can work in that aspect to change some of the narrative in the economy.
Why not? Sure, why not? I mean, it'll tell you the very, very loose definition of a Benny is it represents luck. It represents fate. It can represent any number of things that allows you to change the outcome of what's happened in the game and essentially break the rule.
Mm-hmm.
You get to re-roll.
And I think that's the interesting aspect of it is because it's an intentional, you get to break the rule. Breaking the rules with the narration is fine too. You know, you can absolutely, you know, going back to the medieval sword fight, the sword does slip out of your hand. And as it flips and tumbles through the air, you're able to reach up, grab it, and drag it down with all that extra momentum through the opponent. And that explains why you go from a complete miss and dropping the weapon to the other end of the spectrum to hit with the rays.
Right, but then it becomes, look, well, wait a minute. Should they have to make an agility roll per the rules to catch that weapon? And should that be counted as multi-action penalties? No, they're spending the Benny. Go ahead, narrate that it slides out of their hand and they catch it again.
It costs something.
It's the Benny is giving them the opportunity. It's creating the opportunity for the reroll. You wouldn't stack a penalty on top of it based on the rules as a regular action because it breaks the regular action rule to begin with.
Right, yeah. That would be dumb. That's a dumb idea.
I mean, think about it. There are edges like the Scavenger Edge, or if you're playing Savage Rift, Scrounger, that allow you, in terms of the licensed material and the actual published material, to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, MacGyver allows you to do that. But yeah.
Yeah, the MacGyver Edge is one of those that if you really want to stretch your improv as a GM, let a player take MacGyver and then try to come up with the gadget they build with them on the fly that gets them out of situation X.
No, it's very cool. In the Eberron game I run, we have an artificer, and he has Gadgeteer and MacGyver. And it blends the character, and yeah, he's constantly doing that. He role plays it to the max of all the crazy shit that he makes to get them in and out of a situation. It works. It has a very good edge.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Rift's Techno Mage who can basically make a gadget in like 6 seconds.
Yeah.
I have somebody who's playing one of those right now, and that's been interesting because, you know, he's come up with a really cool way to make that happen. He's got like a bandolier that like he could like he's got like parts and bits and pieces all over this, and he'll just like pull the bandolier and he'll go to the pieces that he needs and put them together and make the gadget. He's been playing it really well as well. And the cool thing with him is he's been using it to the benefit of the rest of the party more than to the benefit of himself. He's built small gadgets and made them for other party members. Like he made a little gadget that gave somebody the armor power, and he just walked up behind him and like slapped it on his back, hit a button, you know, and he narrated what the other player felt, and it was a cool roll of the dice and a cool narration to help that other player out. So yeah, he's playing the hell out of it.
Nice.
And there again, you know, have that trust in your player to give that cool narration. Stop worrying your player is going to 86 your game and start trusting them to actually do something that feeds the fun part of Fast Furious fun.
Yeah, let him take some of the heavy lifting off your shoulders as a GM as well. Yeah. I mean, trying to come up with lurid descriptions of everything that's happening at all moments, that could be exhausting. And you may be hurting your game if you're trying to, maintain complete and utter totalitarian narrative control.
Yeah, as a GM, I've got too many other things that I'm dealing with to try to come up with that narration every single time. And I think that's sometimes why I don't do it, and sometimes why GMs don't do it, is because we've got, like we say all the time, we've got so many plates spinning that we skip over that part because that's the easiest part to skip over, because just roll the dice and get the damage and move on to the next player. But I think it's worth, and maybe it doesn't need to be done every attack, even by the players, but just pepper it in there, every once in a while, and it'll grow and it'll become easier for everybody to do it.
I guarantee you, play a single game where you narrate everything. Every attack roll, every damage roll, every dice roll that happens. Play one game where you narrate all of those, and you will start to realize exactly why we skip over so much of the mechanics when we're playing these games.
Yeah.
So Dave, I'm going to ask you to share a story with us, with the group.
Yay, Jip time!
Everybody grab your milk and cookies. If you're playing the at-home game, take a shot.
Is there a particular story you're calling upon?
I'm going to kind of put it here in chat so you and I know, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, exactly what we're talking about.
And while he types that, talk amongst yourselves. And we're going to be silent.
There we are.
So we got a scene aboard a ship in a space game, a space session that we're running. Marauders have taken over the ship and they're rounding everybody up. And the persuasive, taunty, nubile concubine is trying to silk through and sneak by, fails that stealth roll, and comes face to face with one of her would-be captors, and says, "I persuade him I persuade him." So let's talk about how that works when you just discuss mechanics versus how that might work and how it might be better as a narrative when you include narrative in that.
So I think we've actually discussed this one on the show before. It was a brand new player who hadn't actually played with that group previously. So I basically threw them an entire scene where they were the only player character on the ship. So they were the only one who could take any actions. And this was to give them kind of a little intro to the group, give them a spotlight moment right at the beginning to kind of get their legs under them, so to speak. And the character is set up to be there as the companion to the ship captain, and the captain is knocked out by the initial attack. And the player just declares that their character, of course, goes out of the captain's bunk to see what's going on, sees the ship is being invaded by pirates or whatnot. And I ask, well, what do you do? And the player announces that, well, they're going to drop into stealth and slip along the catwalk behind one of these pirates, and then proceeds to flub the roll amazingly poorly.
Oh.
And I said, and your foot comes down, taps a can that rolls off the catwalk and falls into the bay, and the pirate turns around, and you're now face to face in as you're going through a doorway, standing on the gantry, face to face with this person. What do you do? And they said, well, I persuade them. Okay, well, what does that look like? And complete deer in the headlights. Oh. This player who had, told me privately that they were a great role player, that the group they were in didn't give them enough room to role play, suddenly found themselves vapor locked, either stage fright being with the new group or not knowing what to do with that particular scene. Didn't matter the why of the vapor lock, but it absolutely happened. And now I've got this player, and I'm like, give me something to work with, and I will describe it for you. But what are you trying to persuade them of?
Well, I have the persuasion skill, and I want to roll that. Was the response, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Not okay. Well, what are you trying to persuade them to do or not?
Are you trying to persuade them that you're a captive? Are you trying to persuade them that are you trying to be seductive? What is your end goal? And I will come up with something. And this player struggled so hard in that moment to fill in the blank.
Damn.
And unfortunately, even for me, it left me going, anything I describe is taking away this player's agency to control their own character, because they're not giving me any intent for that dice roll. And I think that's where this falls apart the most, is anytime the player can't give you the intent behind the action, what is the desired result on the other side of that dice roll? That's where I think you're going to have the biggest problem, because that you have to have before you can manufacture any kind of a narration.
Right, and it makes no difference on the outcome of what the role is going to be. The role is going to be the role, but you've got no context and story for it. If the player can't go, I get this look and smile and twirl my hair, start playing with my hair, and
chest.
Yeah, adjust their chest.
I flash on my ankle.
Or and go, oh my, I'm so lost. What's going on here? Something. Give me some kind. It doesn't even have to be an in-character role play.
Yeah.
It could just be a narration about how you're persuading, and it makes a world of difference in the game. To not have it there makes the game makes it feel forced, and just bumps you out of what's going on. Because Dave described is pretty. Yeah, there's a loud boom. There's firefight going on everywhere. You hear the thud thud of boots along the gangplank. I mean, Dave set this, broad, very detailed scene. He set a full table. And it's like the player showed up and went, you know what? I'm vegan. I can't eat any of this.
Right, yeah.
Like,
I'm vegan.
I mean, that was kind of the effect it had in the game, right? I mean, is that a bad analogy? I mean, that's what it felt like for us, for the other players. They're like, oh, I feel so bad for not only this player, but for Dave, because Dave's trying so hard to help. Like, come on, give me something to work with, anything, something. But I think, to Dave's credit, he didn't just let it go either. It was, no, I'm sorry, you need to give me something before we make this roll.
Wait a minute, are you saying that Dave versus Dave, he forced the player to fucking narrate something?
Yep. Essentially.
Forced the player to narrate it as much as just to give me a...
You don't got to be defensive.
Of the dice roll.
It's all right.
If the dice roll is successful, what is it you want them to do? And the player ended up saying that, this was an attempt to get them to think that they were part of the pirate crew that this person had never run into. was the end result. And then we made a dice roll and we went with it. It's that interesting thing of you can only force so much, because if I tell you no, you're gonna give me a narration, and you don't even know what you want that to start into being for success or failure, you can't give me a narration of that.
No, yeah, true. So I ran 5th edition about a month ago. One time, that was enough. Oh man, fuck hit points. I can't do it. And I had the opposite direction of this, right? Like this guy, he wanted to be creative, right, which was good. But we were having this small fight in the desert, and I was like, all right, so this creature moves past you, and your blow is going to end its life. So what does that look like, right? I'm using the baby steps, and I shit you not, it was almost 11 fucking minutes of him like, okay, so it comes at me, and I bring up my spear. Okay, it comes at me, I bring up my spear, and I'm going to turn to the left. Okay, it's coming at me, and I'm going to bring up the spear, I'm going to turn to the left. I was just like, oh, fuck my life. Just say you fucking killed the thing. Holy shit.
So you got the guy who's going to give you an 11-minute choreographed combat scene that results in the death.
I cross my left foot over my right foot, spin 90 degrees, crossing right back over left.
But he's going to give it to you.
Private Ryan.
But he's going to give it to you like an 8-year-old tells a story. So me and Bob were at the park. We were at the park it was hot, and I said, this is hot outside. He said, yeah, I know. So we were at the park. And
yeah.
Oh God, you're killing me. Just stop.
Yeah, it was sort of like that. Man, I was like, I'm so proud of you, but I gotta get the fuck on with this game. We got more shit to kill.
Did the player at any point tell you the condition of the clouds?
No, well,
do you even want there to be clouds?
Man, I heard.
Are the clouds to the east? I don't know.
Shit down. Only because those motherfuckers, all they do is boast about immersion. They lie to themselves constantly.
Uh-oh, the immersion question. The immersion's coming back out.
There is no such thing.
I agree.
You put your immersion away. No one wants to see that.
Right?
I'm just like, why would you play a reality simulator? You're just like, oh man.
Yeah, like, I mean, you want immersion? Yeah, I'll take you out and we'll fire some simunition rounds at you and see.
That'll get you immersed really quick, like.
Yeah. You find out real quick how to role play fucking taking cover. She looked like,
The easiest way to teach players to actively use things like I take cover in combat is to play paintball or take them to the new club there in Vegas where they let them use the simunition rounds on each other in an active combat.
yeah, man.
I'm going to tell you a great story. So for my son's 18th birthday a couple years ago, he and a friend wanted to go paintballing because he'd never been paintballing. And he was all jazzed about paintball until he took a few hits.
Yeah, that shit hurt. It's fun,
Yeah,
but it hurts.
What the fuck? And like pulled his shirt down and it was welting up like, oh, fuck, no, I don't want, this isn't fun anymore. This isn't fun anymore. No, let's go home. No, I'm done. I'm done. This is a bunch of bullshit. What's this bullshit? I got hit. What's this bullshit?
Yeah. Wait, I got shot? I thought I was just going to shoot other people.
It's
Right.
like the guy told you that's the first time. The instructor was like well, I won't say manager, but they have like the staff there. It goes, okay, you never aim at anybody's head, even with the gear. That's off limits. Never ever. Even with the goggles on, nobody steps onto that range without a helmet and eye protection, period. And even then, no headshots.
Yeah.
If I see anybody take a headshot, you're out of here. You're just gone. And then like, okay, understand it. It's going to hurt. It's going to sting like a bitch. And it's probably going to welt up and bruise. But hey, paintball.
You'd be
There's
all
plenty
right.
of places. And he said there's plenty of places for cover at different heights and locations all over the course. Take advantage of the cover. Get behind the cover, fire, get back behind the cover. And my son just like walked straight through the course. Boom, 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 hitting people going, this is awesome. And then went back for a second round and they went through and just bam, 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 hit him like, oh, this sucks. This sucks. I didn't take cover. This sucks.
Yeah, paintball is a young man's game. I went with a bunch of friends and their kids. It was her son's birthday party, and these kids are out there in t-shirts and shorts playing paintball. And there I am. I've got full camo on. I've got a bandana around my neck. I'm wearing a fucking cup because I got hit in the leg one time, real close, and they're like running around in shorts and fucking t-shirts. I'm like, that shit ain't happening. I'm protected. And you still get hit in that one spot that didn't have the protection. You're like, oh, fuck, I'm done.
Yeah.
Chris looks like a mall security guard who happens to be in the National Guard and sitting at the paintball range.
Who is it? Paul Blurt, security?
Paul Blurt.
Yeah, Paul Blurt, that's me.
Chris stepped out of the sporting goods shop in makeshift riot gear that he cobbled together.
Yeah, like Walking Dead, son of a bitch.
Chris is ready.
Fucking got the hockey pads on.
Right, exactly.
I haven't been in years. It is a lot of fun, but yeah, it hurts like a bitch.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things. Narratively speaking, everybody wants their character to seem larger than life, but you can't just think in like one layer of larger than life. Standing out there and getting shot with bows and arrows and hit and clubbed, that's a tank. A wizard does not do that shit.
Well, I'm going to say this. I think, and I want to use the first Die Hard movie as a great example of how to cinematically include. I think a lot of the problem is GMs and players who are new to Savage Worlds and quite haven't grokked how it works yet don't realize that the real challenge, the real fun in the game is coming up with cinematic narrative explanations of what's going on. So, for example, instead of just going, no, I walk downstairs and I taunt the guy so I could possibly shake him and get a +2 against him.
Yeah.
Nope. I break the neck of the guy he sent upstairs to kill me. And then in blood, I write, I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho. And I send him down the elevator when I'm standing on top of the elevator, listening in, doing recon. I've taunted that son of a bitch. And when the first time we meet face to face, guess what? I still get my +2
Fuck yeah.
for an intimidation. And
Sure, why not, right?
Right. And that's an inventive use of the intimidation. And the bad guy, the GM, does the same thing, realizes, makes a notice roll, goes, hey, that asshole's not wearing shoes. Shoot the glass. Shoot the glass. Let's, instead of like trying to kill him, let's make this whole area a hazard that forces him to stop doing what he's doing. And I don't think players or GMs are used to thinking in cinematic terms. They're used to thinking in the game terms. Like, well, okay, it's an action, it's a round, it's a combat. I can do a wild attack. I can do a push maneuver. I can instead of making you. I guess what I'm proposing and trying to champion is start from story, then apply the rules. What would make this an interesting taunt? How can I do this in a way that adds to the story instead of just being an asshole and making a taunt roll?
I think there's another aspect to this, and unless you're coming from having played like GURPS to Savage Worlds, you're probably coming from a game that locked you into a class and a specific role that your character had to fill going into the game. You were the thief, you were the warrior, you were the paladin, you were the mage. Savage Worlds, you're not those things.
Fucking Fate again, man.
You're fucking, you're Scott W., the Savage cheerleader, and that's all you've got. You've got this character sheet that's full of a bunch of dice numbers for all those skills you're going to use, but you don't have this predefined fucking, well, I'm a tank, I'm a wizard. No, you're a guy walking into combat. What would you actually do? What would your character do from their motivation? And then go with a narration that fits that rather than the, well, I walk in and I'm going to take fire because I'm the tank. No, even the most freaking, heavily armored guy didn't actively try to get hit. He still tried not to get hit.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, you have a favorite saying for about, hey, here's the difference between playing a wizard in D&D versus playing a wizard in Savage Worlds.
Yeah.
Explain that multiple action thing that you have mentioned more than one time that you explained to new players.
Yeah,
what
sure.
A wizard can do.
Yeah, so because I warn them, like, please don't think of this like you think of fucking Dungeons and Dragons, right? And so I'm like, here's your wizard, right? So in D&D, you cast your spell and you're done. You throw your dagger, you're done. You stab something, you're done. And you can move here and there, right? In Savage Worlds, the expectation is that you're going to use those bennies to cast a spell, fucking throw your dagger, and get up on someone and kick him in the dick, right? There's these multi-layered of actions that you're allowed to do, and so you have to be able to think in that fourth dimension chess, right? Instead of just, oh, I fucking stab you. Oh, he stabbed me. Oh, this is interesting. I'm so glad I fucking spent 4 hours fucking doing this.
So
yeah, I actually really like Carlin's his comment. That makes a lot of sense.
What does this comment say?
No, it's story desired plus dice and rules applied equals actual action result.
Hold on a second, Chris. We have to have a discussion after the podcast because
I stepped over the intern.
Dustin has one fucking job on this podcast.
That's right. He's got one job.
Okay, don't even do this thing that much, and you fucked it up.
Dustin, could you read that comment for us?
I know.
Why, certainly.
Fuck.
Carlin Kendrick, story desired plus dice and results applied equals actual action result.
I really like that. That's really cool.
I liked it. Let's do a second take. I want more old-timey 1940s news. Newsy guy, like Dateline, that kind of thing. Go for it.
Dateline, NBC. Carlin Kendrick says story desired plus dice and results applied equals actual action. Take it to the bank, America.
That gal's got gams for days.
Boy, howdy.
I think that's a neat thing that he wrote there.
Yeah, man.
Well, I mean, let's talk about this. So, for example, what would you do if you played? How much more fun would chess be if every move you made in the game, you told a story? How much more interesting would checkers be if every move in the game maybe you told a story? Or when you jumped over somebody, you narrated something that, and then he lands on the other side, he kicked your king in the dick. Ha! Same kind of thing.
You have me, bitch.
Yeah.
Same kind of rules, but now you're just adding story to it.
According to John Wick, so you're playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. You're playing chess and adding a story to it. Uh-huh.
That was a very good article he wrote, and it was very true.
I think that brings up an interesting point. We've got we've got some people that kind of want to take a role-playing game and turn it into a war game.
Well, it's the roots of all this shit.
Yeah,
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
they're wanting to take a role-playing game back to being just a war game. And then you've also got the other end of the spectrum, the players who want to take the role-playing game that started as a war game and remove the wargaming aspect from it entirely and just have a bunch of storytelling.
Yeah, they want to have the feels and the touches.
Right.
And unfortunately, your job as the GM is to make it interesting for both those people to sit at the same table and play.
Right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up a Monopoly board, but nobody's going to roll dice, and we're going to tell a story.
Yeah,
Well,
basically.
based on where you land.
Right. Not
Yeah.
even just, I stroll down. It's a wonderful morning, and I'm strolling down Baltic Avenue, and I decide to buy the railroad. Yeah. I mean, okay. Give me a roll to see if you get to Baltic Avenue. I mean,
Right.
We weren't rolling dice.
Role play that top hat, motherfucker.
yeah.
No, you got to roll dice. You got to roll dice, and then you move to where you land, and then you have to narrate what happens when you land there. I land on Boardwalk. It's owned by Scott. Oh, I try to get out of it without paying him rent.
I'm a slumlord, motherfucker. You're in trouble.
Oh shit! I got go to jail. I spend a penny and I hire a really, really good lawyer. You can see-
Now tell Monopoly is an old game.
So what do you guys think about this too? What about using NPCs or story elements as bennies? Not necessarily character action or
I too heard that podcast, and that was a neat idea, though.
Fear the Boot. Let's give credit where credit's due. Yeah, Scott's absolutely correct. Fear the Boot talked about this morning in the fact that you missed the shot, but you made friends with a beat cop a few months back, and he just happened to be strolling along and took the shot at the same time, and he hit.
It's sort of the reverse of the Fanatics setting rule, right? But
Right, or it's
using
connection.
characters,
Kind of like-
allied extras. Yeah.
Well,
About
I think
using the
that-
narrative elements of connection when you're spending a penny instead of having the edge and running through the rules of it.
I think the only slippery slope that starts is the idea of who can take those additional actions. Yeah, I don't think that you want to assign that additional action to a allied extra, because then you're actually taking away an action that would have happened in the course of combat by that spend of a penny. You still want to keep the penny spent to only count for that character's actions. So I think that's the interesting aspect there. Is there has to be this non-engaged bystander who can take a representative action, even if that representative action isn't the beat cop who takes another shot, but it's the guy who got in the way, and now because he was in the way, the enemy couldn't dodge, or whatever the case may be. You can find very interesting ways, and maybe it doesn't even need to be an NPC at that point. It could just be, the crane operator who happened to be swinging the crane through on the job site that you happen to be in the middle of fighting.
Okay,
And,
so
look, your shot ricochets off the crane and hits the guy.
Yeah.
okay,
Because
I think
and turned it into a success.
I agree with you that if the player is spending the Benny to reroll or use the Benny, it's really falls under the umbrella of player agency. That's theirs to decide what they're doing it narration-wise. It shouldn't be to the default of another player. However, brings up an interesting point for the GM. You fire on the big bad guy, you hit him for 4 wounds. The big bad guy soaks all of them. You hit, and what ends up happening is the bullet passed through an innocent bystander, and it slowed it down enough to where it didn't do any. It became a graze for the big bad, and now I've got a situation where the hero is shot. Now I'm throwing this out there as an idea to challenge the player. Dick move? Yeah, definitely. Interesting story?
I think it's a lot more likely that if, as the GM, you're spending a Benny to soak the wound, that's the big bad grabbing a human shield at the last moment. More than the player accidentally shoots, the pregnant mother who's pushing her stroller through the battlefield. And
So this is the scene from
down enough that it doesn't injure the big bad that it hits.
So
I think
this
that
is
might be a bit too much to do to your players.
So this is the scene. This is the scene from Dead End with Christopher Walken, where he's trying to do the assassination thing, and then it's the senator hiding behind a woman or something on stage. That kind of bit where the bullet doesn't affect him. I mean, is that what we're talking about? Like the big bad all of a sudden just grabs a woman, happens to be standing at the bus stop, and just throws her, boop, 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 and you end up riddling that woman full of bullet holes, and he just drops her down to the ground.
See, and the interesting aspect of it is, where Scott went with this is the opposite of the Fanatic section. It absolutely is perfect there, because Fanatic is this idea that the big bad takes those wounds, and now you're narrating it away that somebody jumped in the way. Instead, the big bad spent a penny and grabbed a motherfucker and got him in the way.
I mean, that has the same effect. That makes the players hate that villain, right?
Yeah.
Like, just despise and hate that villain. Like, oh my God, really? So another thing too, like maybe an intimidation role for your bad guy, narrative speaking, is him grabbing an innocent bystander or somebody the character loves and putting a gun to their head. And go, and as the intimidation, I will pull this trigger. I will shoot her dead if you do not drop your weapon and back the fuck off.
Right. It's almost like it's limited only by your fucking imagination.
Yeah.
Wow. Imagine that. Holy shit.
Oh, this is why we have Scott on the podcast. I was wondering.
It's almost like you have this set of rules that can apply to anything and are written modularly to work with anything, but the onus is on you to create the story and how things work and what they look like.
Look,
and then just trust the rules.
What? I don't get it.
I need the rules to tell me exactly what the fuck I can and can't do.
I think the rules are telling me to create a pirate game setting, call it through high water and hell, and have a octopus shark, not a shark octopus. Yeah.
Motherfucker has 8 heads.
Lucasa, goddammit. Lucasa.
Bukaki?
Lucasa?
What the fuck,
well,
Chris?
I don't know. I heard Lucasa. That sounds like the house of a really cool guy who'll buy you beer.
Could be.
I thought it was the guy from Iron Eagle.
No, it's the name of a heavy metal band.
Wow.
No, we're throwing this out here. We're throwing this out here. We're giving Chris a hard time, but congratulations, Chris, on the successful funding of Hell Through High Water.
Yeah, dude.
Through Hell and High Water, your pirate adventure setting.
How long did it take you guys to get funded?
A little under 2 days.
Fucking A. Nice.
There we go.
Yeah. So we're just looking now to hit some of those stretch goals, and it's not really a stretch goal, but I'll just say that if we hit double what we asked for, something cool is going to happen.
Yeah. Handy all around.
I'll tell you guys offline.
So no handies.
No handies.
Those are
No.
off the table.
No, but a few dick pics to the big fans.
Young ladies have not been tested.
Oh fuck no! All right, we should wrap up.
Please address all hate
on
mail
that
to-
note, send any complaints to Dustin@gmail.com, carry the show, or just attention Dustin, SavageDaddy@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Jared Savage Daddy for Chris, Dave, Dustin, and Scott saying keep rolling, stay savage.